Okay, let's now bring in our guest. Joining us from New York is Pablo Ohana, who's a senior political advisor. Pablo, as a former campaign advisor to UK political parties, in your opinion, how much can you pin this apparent shift on the current leadership of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak himself? Or is it sort of the collective failure of the Conservative Party and its many years in power and its many prime ministers that have been through the past 14 years?
Well, there's definitely an element that people are sort of have had enough of Tory rule. And I think, as you say, 14 years is quite a lot if that's not the party you want. But the Prime Minister and actually the people around him have really not made this easy. This campaign has been dominated by Tory gaffes that started, as you showed in the package there, with him being pouring, making this announcement in the pouring rain. But then it just went from gaff to gaff to gaff. It was Gamblegate. It was the D-Day disaster. It really has not been a good campaign. And I think it's just gone from bad to worse for him. And barring a seismic kind of pandemic level, event between now and Thursday, I don't see any way in which they can pull this back.
This is I have a statistic here, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It is saying that the UK will have the lowest growth rate in the G7 in the year 2025. To what extent do you think is that a reflection of the Conservatives' policies?
I think it is a reflection of Conservative policy, but it has been exacerbated, of course, by Brexit. And as your last speaker was just saying there in Scotland, that there is this kind of like a conspiracy of silence around this huge elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. Brexit is destroying our economy, but not only our economy, it's destroying our country and our sort of sense of character, who we are. Brexit at the moment in Australia is costing us £1 million every single hour. And it makes me laugh that we're in the middle of this election campaign where, everyone sort of throws statistics and accusations all over the place. And you've got Labour claiming that Tory policies cost 37 billion, Tories claiming Labour policies cost a similar kind of, 40 billion or something. Meanwhile, independent economists and impartial analysts have concluded that Brexit is costing us £100 billion every single year. And nobody's talking about it. Yes, the Lib Dems are talking about going back into the single market, and that's absolutely a logical first step. But generally, no one's talking about this enormous damage to our economy, which is costing local people, like the average family is thousands of pounds worse off per year because of this historic mistake that we made.
Right.
And people are recognizing that, of course, and the polls are shifting and so on and so forth. But none of the parties, not seriously, are talking about this absolutely phenomenal mistake.
Okay, Pablo, I know you speak to us from New York, but obviously we've seen these huge protests in London over the Gaza war. And what are the options for Britons who support a free Palestine and an end to the Gaza war, who feel that neither Labour nor the Conservatives represent their views?
It is true that Labour are losing some support in it. Personally, I'm not sure it's going to make a ton of difference. And we've sort of seen this born both in politics and outside of that. There was obviously early this year, there was a lot of controversy surrounding Israel being involved in Eurovision. And there was expected to be a big kind of, protests, and that viewing figures would be down, and actually viewing figures were up, and Israel did really well in the voting from the public. So I think that there is going to be an impact. I don't think it's going to be severe. I think voters who are feeling as though neither Labour nor the Conservatives support them may look to small parties. And of course, we did have a by-election earlier in the UK where George Galloway and his party, the Workers' Party, basically ran on that platform and did really well. They won that by-election. There is kind of mixed polling at the moment about whether he'll hold that seat in the general election. Of course, by-elections are very, can be very sort of singular issues, and people run on a very specific platform and they can get elected that way on a lower turnout and things like that. Mm-hmm. Whether that transpires in a general election remains to be seen. As I say, polling's a little bit all over the place on that. But I think people who feel like they don't have a home in either Labour or the Conservatives on this issue may look to the other parties' places out. The Lib Dems have been very clear that they want a ceasefire. I think ultimately, if I'm honest, despite how people really feel, elections often come back to how it is impacting them in this moment, in their pocket, on their finances. And I think whilst there will be a little protest vote here and there, honestly, if I'm truthful about it, I think people will go back to voting on the issues that matter to them right now, and that will often be cost of living, NHS.
Will,